really interesting. I wanted to go, I've got notes, and I'm going to go over a little bit of those, hopefully, during time frame. But what I wanted to open up this time, and I wanted to give you what I kind of picture about what this chapter is really about. It's about service to others. So I look at this and I think there's a lot here, but I want to take us back to 2008. In 2008, my world was literally falling to pieces. I'm in real estate, and that was when the real estate market crashed. So I am $300,000 in debt. I've got 4 children, another one on the way. I've got a house that's $19,000 behind on payments. They're getting ready to repo one of my 2 cars, the only car that hauls my entire family. They're repoing that one. And we don't need to talk about how smart I was at that point. So we're going to zip right over that part of it. The fact that the Lord has a good way of showing us, if you read the scriptures and obey, the pain doesn't seem to have to be quite so bad. The Lord was really bringing me to a place where instead of me serving, I was going to be put in a place to need to be served. Does that make sense? I mean, and I may not be saying that real succinctly, but I wasn't used to need anything. And I think everybody in this room could probably, we're all living in a house, we all have cars, we all have food, we all have everything that we need. We're all kind of what we call self-sufficient, right? And that's where I was. And the Lord was very slowly peeling back these pieces so that it was exposing my need. And in that, I had a few choice church members. A few church members that came alongside of me at that moment when I was really at my lowest points. And it was so interesting to see. A lot of times, I hear stories all the time. I had this bill, and it came to the day when that bill was due, and I got a check in the mail, and I went and paid that bill. I'm so amazed. The Lord never worked that way with me. It was really interesting. He would allow that bill to go past the due date. And there's someone in this room right now where I could see if that happened, your heart would sink, right? So if you're used to paying all your bills on time, never being behind, I was multiple times, power, water, car payments, house payments. He was very slowly pulling me to the point where he had to get me to that stage where I said, okay, Lord, you are sufficient. But he used people, church members typically, right? People from the fellowship that I knew and that I loved and that I was, be honest, really heart open, honest, it's pride, right? How hard is it when you got to go to somebody and say, I'm in trouble. I am really in trouble. I had a point where I had to go to my father and ask for $19,000 to get my house payment caught up. Hard. I had a point where my daughter got cancer, as most of you know, in 2008, at the same time when the real estate market crashed. And my wife and my daughter moved to Memphis for 9 months. And then I kept my 3-year-old, my 4-year-old, that's not 4 years old anymore. He's in the back running the audio. And then I had my eldest daughter, which is now 21. And I went from typical dad, I'm not going to say anything other than I was used to my wife handling the house, handling the laundry, handling dinner, right? You don't think of those. Going to the grocery store. You don't think of any of that. As the husband, it just happened. I did real estate. She did that. Well, it was just like this that she was gone. No prep, no extra, no availability for me to prepare. She just was there one day, gone the next. Poof. Okay, I didn't know how to boil water. And that sounds funny, but it's not much of an exaggeration. I literally, the first day she's gone, I go to the grocery store and I get those little boxes of Hamburger Helper, and tons of them, and macaroni and cheese, right? So I get the staples, And first night, I'm ready. And I got that big old thing of meat that you could get at Walmart, the big tube of meat. I'm reading the back of this box. Okay, I'm reading the back of the box. The box says, take and boil the water, do this, and then take a pound of ground beef and brown it.
How much is a pound?
You know what? I didn't even know how to brown the meat. What are you talking about? But yeah, I called my wife. I'm like, honey, I need your help. I got this box and it's saying, brown a pound of ground beef. And she started laughing. And I wasn't laughing. And she's like, oh, you're serious? And I'm like, yeah, I have no idea how to do this. So she said, take a pound. She said, about a pound. I said, how do you do that? Do you weigh it, or do you? She says, no. She said, you just take something about the size of your fist, and put it in the pan. And she literally walked me through every step of the way to get this done. And so right then was a turning point for me for realizing how insufficient I am. I'm not an island unto myself. And the Lord took me through that, and then took me to I had a precious lady in this church. She would bring me meals on Wednesday nights that would get me through Sunday, and then she'd bring me meals from Sunday to the next Wednesday, right? And these are full meals. These are like meat and potatoes and cans of corn, and they had, she would write in black marker on the top, explicit instructions. I mean, open the can. We're talking really basic. She was such a blessing to me because she was being a servant. She saw a need and she met that need, if that makes sense. And I'm obviously not going to be able to touch all of the people that touched my life at that point. I had another person that said, Skip, I just want to mow your grass. I just want to come over and mow your grass. That's all. I'm like, no, I don't need you to mow my grass. He goes, no, I really want you to mow my grass. I want to mow your grass. And I said, okay, that sounds great. And it was such a blessing because it was just another piece of the thing that was off of my plate, right? So that's just another thing that's off. And I think that in my opinion, when we're talking about these chapters, I want you guys to think with me how to be a servant. We're going to go through some of the sections here because we're going to talk about servanthood and how you are an integral part of everyone's life that's in this room. So let's just take this room, the people that are here right now. How have the people that are in this room touched your life in some way, shape, or form? How are we, as a church, how do we interact? How do we, you might be good at one thing, I might be good at another. How do we bless each other in that realm and be a servant to each other? Because as I started out, I said, this is not all about me. That's what this chapter is talking about. It's talking about, as a church, how can we take each other and bless each other and get along as one, right? So Art and I might not agree on something, but as two brothers in Christ, we can disagree about something that's not doctrinal. Is doctrine negotiable in this church? No, we all know that. We're not talking doctrinal. So don't misinterpret what I'm saying. I'm not talking doctrine. I'm talking, what color is the carpet? What color are the chairs? Do we mow the grass on Thursday or do we mow it on Tuesday? Are we going to really get in? there are some, there are times we might find someone to argue about that. I won't. We don't need to go. We don't need to go any deeper. I'm not going to go there. So we could argue about it, but in reality, what this chapter is talking about is the church is not about my preference. It's not about my desire. It's about how can I be a servant of all. There's a. Let me see. There is a section here in Mark 9:35. If you want to turn there. It talks here, and it says, "And he sat down and called the 12, and saith unto them, If any man desire to be first, the same shall be last and servant of all." The New Testament, when we're talking about this, there were times where the disciples would argue about who is going to be first. I want to be on the right hand and on the left, right? We can go through multiple examples. In this, what Christ says over and over and over again, he showed us so many examples of him becoming the servant. He was our prime example of what it means to be a servant, to give all. And in this verse where he's talking about the fact that if you want to be first, you got to be a servant of who? All, of all. And again, we're talking in the realm of the church. In Ephesians 3:7, it talks about, "Whereof I was made a minister according to the gift of the grace of God, given unto me by the effectual working of his power." We got to be careful that it's not about the me. It doesn't, the church doesn't become about a me. Whether it's any one of us as an individual, we are stretching out. We are always open. We're always searching to see who we can serve. My gift, personally, is service. That's my gift. My gift is to do, to meet needs, to serve. So I'm always looking for something to do. Does that make sense? Which is, if we can boil it back to how I opened up, God was taking that and he was pulling from me, right? You can do this. You can do that. He was bringing me to the stage of what? Need. Instead of service, I was being pulled to need. God knows each one of us and where we all are and what our gifts are. What I was falling into the trap of is it's about me and I can do this. Lord, you sit here. I got this one. I'm going to do this. That's me. That's if I'm not careful, that's who I am now. I feel like I can handle this. I got it. It's all wrapped up. In fact, doing this tonight, it's hard for me because I'm out of my wheelhouse. This isn't what I would call a gift. This isn't my gift. I enjoy it. I mean, I enjoy it more when we all sit around a table and we go back and forth, right? So when I think of this, I think of that back and forth and, hey, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? This isn't my gift. We're going through this and pulling it out. And so the Lord is always trying to kind of pull me, stretch me into something new, into something different so that I can be a blessing, hopefully, to those around me, so that I can do these things. And again, for me, it was very difficult to accept people helping. Does that make sense? It's just hard. It's even harder asking, right? It's hard to ask for help. For me. Now, maybe it's not for everybody else, but it is for me. There was a point where the church helped me with my utility bills. That was hard. I mean, it sounds dumb. It's pride. We're all family. We all love each other. We're all different. Not a single one of us is the same. And if you had pulled us out of this environment, would we rub shoulders? if I rub shoulders in a room with you, would we really rub shoulders if we hadn't known each other, right? This bond of Christ is what? That's the uniter. That's the part that brings us together. Does that make sense? So the me first attitude that we're kind of going over, he goes into pretty grave detail. If you turn over to Philippians 2, we're going to go through Philippians 2, we're going to go through verse number 9. And I'm going to have to speed up. So in verse 2, verses 1 and 2, he's talking about being like-minded. So in Philippians 2, verse 1 and 2, it says, if there be therefore any consolation in Christ, if any comfort of love, if any fellowship of the Spirit, if any bowels of mercy, fulfill ye my joy, that you be like-minded, having the same love, being of one accord and one mind. So in those two verses, he's pleading for us to be one mind, because you're going to fulfill his joy, that ye be like-minded, having the same love, being of one accord, of one mind. Going on in verse 3 and 4, it talks about putting someone else in front of yourself. So let therefore be done, let nothing be done through strife or vainglory, but in lowliness of mind, let each esteem who? Others better than themselves. Look not every man on his own things, but every man also on the things of others. So again, this is the part where we're going backwards. We're saying it's not about me. It's not about an individual. It's about the group. So in verses, going on in verse 9, 5 through 9, we're talking about Christ being that example. So let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus, who, being in the form of God, thought it not robbery to be equal with God, but made himself of no reputation, and took upon him the form of a servant, and was made in the likeness of men. And being found in fashion as a man, he humbled himself and became obedient unto death, even unto the death of the cross. Wherefore, God also hath highly exalted him, and given him a name which is above every name. So backing up, if you go back up to verse 7, but he made himself of no reputation, and took upon him the form of a servant, and was made in the likeness of men. He didn't make a name for himself. This is where he became a servant. So this is his example for us, saying, hey, listen, this is the example. He didn't make a name for himself, but he made a name as he became a servant. And in verse 8, he said, and being found in fashion as a man, he what? Humbled himself and became obedient unto death, even the death of the cross. He took that and he became flesh, right? And became in fashion as a man, and he humbled himself. In verse 9, he emptied himself and he put aside heaven and all the glory to die for us. And in the result, God exalted him, the Lord Jesus. So in these, what are we seeing? We're seeing this picture that Christ is painting for us so that we can see how God took each one of these pieces and he gave us an example of what he's really looking for, right? So he's looking for us to become a servant, for us to serve each other in that picture in Philippians 2. Now, in the book, what it did is it took at that point and it talked about that picture of service, and Tom Rainer is a researcher because he's got a huge research team. And he said, my research team recently conducted a survey of churches that were inwardly focused. For the most part, they were not serving past their own walls and their own members. In other words, these churches were largely self-serving. In our survey, we found 10 dominant behavior patterns of members in these churches. See if you recognize any. worship wars. One or more factions in the church want music just the way they like it. Any deviation is met with anger and demands for change. The order of service must remain constant. Certain instruments are required, others are prohibited. Then there was the, I don't foresee this in our church, the prolonged minutia meetings. So the church spends an inordinate amount of time in different meetings. Most of the meetings deal with the most inconsequential items, and while the Great Commission and the Great Commandments are rarely topics of discussion. Another problem that he saw was facility focus. The church's facilities develop iconic status. One of the highest priorities of the church is the protection and preservation of rooms, furniture, and other visible parts of the church building and grounds. Another problem was program driven. Each church has programs, even if they don't admit it. When we start doing ministries a certain way, it takes on a programmatic status. The problem is not with the programs. The problem develops when the programs become the end instead of the means to greater ministry. 5, inwardly focused budget. A disproportionate share of the budget is used to meet the needs and comforts of the members instead of reaching beyond the walls of the church. Inordinate demand for pastoral care. All the church members deserve care and concern, especially in times of needs of crisis. Problems develop, however, when the church members have unreasonable expectation for even minor matters. Some members expect a pastoral staff to visit them regularly merely because they have membership status. Attitudes of entitlement. This issue could be a catch-all for many of the points named here. The overreaching attitude is one of demanding and having a sense of deserving special treatment. Number 8, greater concern about change than the gospel. Almost any noticeable change in the church evoke the ire of many, but those same passions are not evident about participating in the work of the gospel to change lives. Anger and hostilities. Members are constantly angry. They regularly express hostility towards the church staff and other members. Evangelic apathy. Very few members share their faith on a regular basis. More are concerned about their own needs rather than the greatest eternal needs of the world and community in which they live. The picture that he was seeing in these churches was the I, me, myself, it's about me. And so in any of these that I mentioned, do we see that in this church?
I don't see any of it.
I didn't see hardly any of these in here. Now, again, can you see pieces of that here? I think so. I think you can see pieces of that in this church. I'm not saying, I would hardly ever say we're a perfect body. Can you ever be a perfect body? You can't be. You can't do that. And I don't think that's, Christ uses people, and people are sinners. We're all sinners. Again, I stand here in front of you saying, I see myself and I know my own weaknesses. One of my weaknesses is pride, because I feel like I'm what? Self-sufficient. I can do this. But the question is, the Lord took me to a place where I couldn't do it. That wasn't an option for me, if that makes sense. And in this chapter, what we're talking about, we need to be very careful that the church, us as a group of believers, that we don't become what? Inward focused, right? So in the danger is that we focus everything inside the walls, that we forget about the outside of the walls, but yet and that can mean us as individual believers. In other words, when the Lord had taken me to a certain point, He brought believers alongside of me who went outside of their own way to do what? To carry my burden and my load to help me along the way. And so when we talk about being a church member and it's not about me. It's not about me personally, and it's not specifically about this church. It's about Jesus Christ. And so I think in this chapter, he's really talking about the fact that we need to be careful that we carry the mind of Christ as a church, right? And so, again, I think Pastor does a phenomenal job of keeping us focused on the book, going in the right direction, right? So this is a wonderful book. I liked it. In fact, I read this chapter probably 4 times, 5 times, because like I said, we could have sat here in this time frame and read the whole chapter because it's really short. But we have to be careful that we don't fall in. I guess I'm saying we are aware of the traps of being I-minded, me-minded, myself-centered, focused, that we don't fall into that trap, because that trap is easy to fall into. And I think, again, each one of us is different. And does anybody have any examples how anybody's ever come alongside of you and carried a burden for you? Does anybody have that? Does anybody have any example in your own life of that?
Yeah, well, remember when you came over and helped me and Michael with our
Hot water heater.
hot water heater?
There you go. Okay.
And because you had to have that special pan under it. Michael was like, what am I going to do with this? Not like I could help him.
So again, the key is how as we as a group of believers, again, we're not the same. None of us are the same, but what a blessing that is that you have skills that I don't have, and I've got skills that maybe you don't have. Does that make sense? And we can all come together as a body of believers and come alongside. Even during the good times, what we would consider the mountaintops, we need our fellow believers to come alongside of us and cheer us on, right? Because invariably in the mountaintop, there's always a valley that's going to
I
come.
would say for me and Michael, I would say probably 99% of our needs are met by church members.
That's
I mean,
good.
Really.
That's fun.
Because we don't have family here.
Sure.
Our family is church.
Yeah.
Church body. And so, yeah, anything stressful or weird or whatever, somebody in the church helps us out.
Sure. Anybody else?
Well, Miss Elizabeth, she's such a blessing, and we have ailments and issues, you know, we go right to her. I don't know how many folks in the church do, but she's such a blessing, you know, to have that.
Yes. Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. Yeah. What else? Anybody else? Think of something that a believer in the church that's come alongside you and done something for you. Oh, I'm sorry.
It happens all the time with me. It's not just one thing, but I guess one of the main ones that stands out in 2014, technically Elijah and I were not even members of the church. I mean, we had visited, we had been a few times and whatnot. My apartment flooded, was waist deep in water. This whole church is who met the needs and come to me when I wasn't even, like I said, I wasn't even a member. You didn't really even know us. You'd seen us a few times, and that was it. And I can't tell you how many times since the apartment flooded, so when my washers and dryers are always going the wrong way, that someone comes up and fills the need. And I do have family here locally. I moved back to this area because this is where my siblings were, and it's where I grew up at. But my church family meets more of my needs than my biological family.
It's neat. That's precious. Anybody else?
We had friends and neighbors come out all, the rain and everything, and had falls both north and down on the airline. And the first one, and then the second one was down, was like, and one of the neighbors, he was out on, and both of them had to go to the divorce because they had And he just said if it comes up again before you get your more fixed, just holler at me. And he had to come over and done it. And they're not real good themselves physically. They've had problems. They've just lost his wife lost a mother just recently. And they're not really the best off. And here they are helping you, and you're like, man, but that's, and I believe they're saved, actually. They go to another church.
Mhm.
But it's just times like that when things happen all at a bunch of times and you're normally able to take care of it all, but too much happens at once.
It's that stretching, I think, the stretching point where, again, for me, it was that stretching point where I couldn't, that there was no options. Does that make sense? I just was past the point of being able to do it, quote, on my own, and I watched God bring people around me and carry me to a certain point. And it's so interesting to see. It was such a blessing, and I even to this day, it's hard to talk about. It's that important to me because it's so hard to talk about because I was going through so much, and it probably didn't seem like a big thing to them. You know what I'm saying? It's not like, I'm sure they were thinking, well, it's not a big deal. I'll just make this meal, right? This is something I can do. It's no big deal. For me, it was the world. It was the world for them to be able to do that. Of course, they might have noticed that my children were getting thinner. Anyway, I don't know. That might not have been a minute for me, come to think. Anyway, I guess where I'll end this is saying, I think we all, it's a good reminder. I don't, like you said, I don't see a huge, on the list, hey, here it is. This is. I think it's just a reminder for us to keep other focused. It's so easy to go in and then forget that we should be going out. And Christ is calling us to be a servant to each other, to be a blessing to each other. And it's a good reminder for me. I get a lot of stuff going all at the same time. I get 100 things going, and I get more me focused than I get outside focus. And so I just thought it was really interesting. I thought it was a good chapter. If you guys don't have one of those books, I know Pastor's got a ton of them, and I know he's willing to give you guys a copy. So if you need one, don't hesitate to get one. Super easy read. Big letters, lots of space between the letters. Notice I said I read it, so that should tell you something. All right, let's close in prayer, and then we'll take some prayer requests. Father, once again,